In the year 1177 BCE, the greatest civilizations of the ancient world collapsed within a single generation. From the mighty Hittite Empire to the golden palaces of Mycenae, from the wealthy trading cities of the Levant to the borders of Egypt itself, an interconnected world that had thrived for centuries vanished almost overnight. For over a century, archaeologists have sought answers in the ruins, and what they've found points to a confederation of seafaring peoples whose very existence was doubted until recently. They buried the evidence. We dig it up. Today, breakthrough DNA analysis from ancient Philistine burials, combined with newly translated cuneiform tablets and enhanced imaging of Egyptian inscriptions, has finally revealed the truth about these mysterious invaders. What you're about to see isn't speculation or theory. It's hard archaeological evidence that rewrites our understanding of one of history's greatest mysteries. This is the Artifacts Detective, and today we're investigating the archaeological truth behind the Sea Peoples and the collapse that ended the Bronze Age. Welcome to the Artifacts Detective, where we investigate history's greatest mysteries through archaeological evidence. I'm your host, and today we're examining one of archaeology's most enduring puzzles: the identity of the Sea Peoples and their role in the Bronze Age collapse. This isn't just ancient history. The events we're investigating today reshaped the entire Mediterranean world and set the stage for the rise of classical civilization. For over 150 years, since French Egyptologist Emmanuel de Rouget first identified them in 1855, the Sea Peoples have remained an enigma. Were they invaders who destroyed a thriving civilization? Climate refugees fleeing drought and famine? Or something else entirely? Today, we'll examine the archaeological evidence from three critical sources: the Egyptian inscriptions at Medinet Habu that first documented these mysterious peoples, the destruction layers found across the eastern Mediterranean that mark their passage, and groundbreaking DNA analysis published in 2019 that finally reveals their origins. We'll also investigate the latest discoveries from sites like Ugarit, where cuneiform tablets preserve desperate final messages before the city's destruction, and Ashkelon, where genetic evidence has solved a 3,000-year-old mystery. But first, let me show you something that will fundamentally change how you think about the end of the Bronze Age. To understand the magnitude of what happened, we must first understand what was lost. The Late Bronze Age, roughly 1500 to 1200 BCE, represented one of humanity's first experiments in globalization. A letter found in the archives at Amarna in Egypt, dating to the 14th century BCE, illustrates this perfectly. Written in Akkadian, the diplomatic language of the age, it details a shipment of copper from Cyprus, paid for with Egyptian gold, to be delivered to a Hittite merchant for transport to Assyria. This wasn't unusual. The Bronze Age Mediterranean was crisscrossed with trade routes carrying not just goods, but ideas, technologies, and people. Mycenaean pottery from Greece has been found in Egyptian tombs. Egyptian artifacts appear in Minoan palaces. Hittite diplomatic correspondence reveals marriage alliances with Babylon. This was a cosmopolitan world of interconnected palace economies, each dependent on the others for critical resources. Bronze itself symbolized this interdependence. Neither copper nor tin, bronze's two components, were widely available. Copper came primarily from Cyprus. Indeed, the island's very name derives from the metal. Tin had to be imported from as far away as Afghanistan or Cornwall. The ability to make bronze weapons and tools depended entirely on maintaining these long-distance trade networks. The earliest indications that this world was under threat come from the Hittite archives at Hattusa, the empire's capital in central Anatolia. A letter dated to approximately 1210 BCE from the Hittite king Suppiluliuma II to the prefect of Ugarit contains an ominous request: "Send me information about the ships of the enemy that you have seen." This wasn't an isolated incident. The Amarna letters, dating slightly earlier, mention raids by groups called the Shurden and the Luka. Egyptian records from the reign of Ramesses II, around 1278 BCE, describe a naval battle against Shurden pirates who had been raiding the Nile Delta. Intriguingly, after defeating them, Ramesses incorporated many Shurden warriors into his own army, where they served as his personal bodyguard. But these early encounters were merely tremors before the earthquake. Something fundamental was changing in the Mediterranean world. And by 1200 BCE, the archaeological record shows a wave of destruction unlike anything seen before or since. The term destruction horizon in archaeology refers to a layer of burnt material, collapsed buildings, and hastily abandoned artifacts that marks a violent end to occupation at a site. What makes the Late Bronze Age collapse unique is the sheer number of sites showing simultaneous destruction around 1200 BCE. At Ugarit on the Syrian coast, French archaeologists uncovered a particularly poignant piece of evidence. In what appears to be the royal palace, they found a kiln containing over 70 clay tablets, letters that were being baked for sending when the city was destroyed. One, labeled RSL1, contains a desperate message from Amurapi, the last king of Ugarit, to the king of Alashia, Cyprus. "My father, the enemy ships are already here. They have set fire to my towns and have done very great damage in the country." The response from Cyprus, found in the same destruction layer, is equally desperate. "The enemy advances against us and there are no troops. 7 enemy ships have appeared offshore and done evil things." Similar destruction layers have been found at sites across the eastern Mediterranean. Mycenae and Pylos in Greece show evidence of burning and abandonment. The Hittite capital of Hattusa was abandoned so quickly that the sacred temples were left unguarded. Troy 6, which many archaeologists identify with Homer's Troy, was destroyed around this time. Even sites in Cyprus and the southern Levant show destruction. But who were these enemies that could coordinate attacks across such a vast area? The answer, it seems, lay buried in the sands of Egypt. The most detailed contemporary account of the Sea Peoples comes from the mortuary temple of Ramesses III at Medinet Habu in Egypt. Built around 1175 BCE, the temple's walls contain both hieroglyphic inscriptions and detailed relief carvings depicting 2 major battles against the Sea Peoples, one by land and one by sea. The inscriptions are remarkably specific. They name the enemy as a confederation of peoples, the Peliset, Cheka, Shekelesh, Denian, and Weshesh, along with the previously encountered Shurden. The text, translated by the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago, reads, "The foreign countries made a conspiracy in their islands. All at once the lands were removed and scattered in the fray. No land could stand before their arms, from Kata, Kode, Karkamish, Azawa, and Alashia on, being cut off at one time. A camp was set up in one place in Amuru. They desolated its people, and its land was like that which has never come into being. They were coming forward toward Egypt, while the flame was prepared before them." This inscription has been crucial for archaeologists because it provides both a list of destroyed kingdoms that matches the archaeological evidence and specific names for the attackers. But the Medinet Habu reliefs offer even more valuable information through their detailed depictions of the Sea Peoples themselves. The battle reliefs at Medinet Habu are among the most detailed military scenes from the ancient world. The land battle scene shows a chaotic melee, but careful analysis reveals significant details about the Sea Peoples' appearance and military technology. The Peliset and Cheka warriors are shown wearing distinctive feathered headdresses, unlike anything in Egyptian military tradition. Their weapons include long, straight swords of a type associated with the Aegean and Central Europe, not the curved Kopesh swords favoured by Egyptians. They carry round shields and fight from chariots similar to, but distinct from Egyptian models. The Sea People's chariots carry 3 warriors compared to the Egyptian 2. Perhaps most significantly, the relief shows ox carts carrying women and children among the warriors. As Dr. Asaf Yasur Landau of the University of Haifa notes in his 2010 book, The Philistines and Aegean Migration, this detail suggests we're not looking at a mere raiding party, but at a massive population movement, entire families seeking new homes. The naval battle scene provides our only contemporary depiction of Sea People's ships. They show vessels with high prows decorated with bird heads, a feature known from Mycenaean pottery, but alien to Egyptian naval tradition. Intriguingly, while Egyptian ships are shown with both sails and oars, the Sea People's vessels appear to rely on sails alone, suggesting different naval technologies or tactics. While the Egyptian sources provide our most vivid account, the recently translated tablets from Ugarit offer a more immediate perspective on the catastrophe. The city's destruction around 1190 BCE preserved an archive that reads like a real-time chronicle of disaster. A tablet labeled 20 rupees, 28 paise, published in full only in 2011, records an exchange between Amurapai of Ugarit and Eshuwara, the senior governor of Alashia. Eshuwara writes, 20 enemy ships have been sighted. Guard yourself. Amurapi's response, found in the same archive, is telling, all my troops and chariots are in Kate, and all my ships are in Luka. Thus the country is abandoned to itself. This reveals a crucial detail. The kingdoms weren't simply overwhelmed by superior force. Their armies were deployed elsewhere when the strike came, suggesting the Sea Peoples exploited, or perhaps even created, this vulnerability. Another tablet, RS 18.147, contains Amurapi's response to a plea for help from the king of Alashia. Does not my father know that all my infantry and chariotry are in Kate, and that all my ships are in the land of Luka? Thus the land is prostrated. 7 ships of the enemy inflicted much damage upon us. The number 7 appears repeatedly in these texts, possibly indicating a standard raiding unit size, or perhaps having symbolic significance. In 2011, a team led by David Kaniewski published a groundbreaking study in PLOS-1 using radiocarbon dating and climate proxy data from Syria. Their work at Tel Twaini, ancient Gibala, provided the first precisely dated destruction layer associated with the Sea Peoples. The radiocarbon dates cluster tightly around 1192 to 1190 BCE, with a margin of error of only 10 years. This matches perfectly with the chronology derived from Egyptian and Hittite king lists. More importantly, the study revealed evidence of severe drought conditions beginning around 1200 BCE and lasting for over 300 years. Core samples from the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea confirm this climate data. Pollen analysis shows a sharp decline in agriculture throughout the region, with oak forests retreating and drought-resistant plants becoming dominant. This environmental crisis would have placed enormous stress on the palace economies of the Bronze Age, which depended on agricultural surpluses to support their complex bureaucracies and military forces. The most dramatic breakthrough in understanding the Sea Peoples came in July 2019, when a team led by Michael Feldman of the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History published the results of ancient DNA analysis from Ashkelon, one of the 5 Philistine cities mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. The team analyzed genetic material from 10 individuals buried at Ashkelon, including infants buried under house floors, a distinctly non-Levantine burial practice. The results were extraordinary. Individuals from the early Iron Age, around 1200 to 1000 BCE, showed a significant genetic component from southern Europe, particularly the Aegean region. This European ancestry wasn't present in Bronze Age burials from the same site and had largely disappeared by the later Iron Age. Dr. Daniel Master, director of the Leon Levy expedition to Ashkelon, explained the significance. This is direct physical evidence that the Philistines immigrated into the region. The babies were the children of the immigrants themselves. The genetic signature pointed specifically to populations from Crete, mainland Greece, Sardinia, and the Iberian Peninsula, precisely the regions that some scholars had long suspected as Sea People's homelands, based on linguistic analysis of their names and material culture similarities. Beyond DNA and texts, the archaeological record shows dramatic changes in material culture at sites associated with the Sea Peoples. At Ashkelon, Ashdod, and Ekron, archaeologists have found a distinctive pottery style called Philistine Bichrome ware, which combines Mycenaean shapes and decorative motifs with local Canaanite techniques. Dr. Penelope Mountjoy from the British School at Athens, a leading expert on Mycenaean pottery, notes, "The ceramic evidence shows a clear connection to the Aegean, but with local adaptations. This is exactly what we'd expect from a migrant population adapting to new circumstances." Architecture also changed dramatically. The Megaron, a rectangular hall with a central hearth characteristic of Mycenaean palaces, appears at Philistine sites. New technologies arrived too, including an improved potter's wheel and new metalworking techniques that allowed for better weapons and tools. Recent paleoclimatic research has added another dimension to our understanding of the Sea Peoples. A 2018 study in Nature examining cave formations in northern Israel revealed that between 1250 and 1100 BCE, the region experienced the most severe drought of the past 10,000 years. Dr. Eric Klein of George Washington University, author of 1177 BC, the year civilization collapsed, argues that this environmental crisis triggered what he calls a systems collapse. The interconnected palace economies of the Bronze Age, dependent on agricultural surpluses and long-distance trade, couldn't adapt quickly enough to changing conditions. When one part of the system failed, Klein explains, it created a cascade effect. Crop failures led to famine. Famine led to internal unrest. Internal unrest prevented kingdoms from maintaining their armies, and without armies, they couldn't protect trade routes. It was a perfect storm. Into this chaos came the Sea Peoples, not as destroyers of civilization, but as desperate refugees from the same collapsing system. The evidence increasingly suggests they were displaced Mycenaeans and other Aegean populations, driven from their homes by the same drought and societal breakdown that weakened the kingdoms they would later attack. The archaeological evidence, when taken together, paints a picture far more complex than the traditional narrative of barbarian invaders destroying civilization. The Sea Peoples were not outsiders attacking a thriving world, but insiders, refugees from the collapsing Bronze Age system itself. The DNA evidence from Ashkelon proves that at least some Sea Peoples were indeed migrants from southern Europe, confirming the Egyptian records that describe them as coming from the islands. The destruction layers at sites like Ugarit, precisely dated to around 1190 BCE, confirm the Egyptian chronology. The drought evidence explains why these populations were on the move, and why the established kingdoms were too weak to resist. Most tellingly, the material culture shows not destruction, but transformation. The Philistine cities that emerged from the ashes weren't crude imitations of what came before, but sophisticated hybrid cultures combining Aegean and Levantine traditions. Within 2 centuries, the genetic evidence shows these populations had largely integrated with local peoples, though they maintained their distinct identity for centuries more. This new understanding of the Sea Peoples forces us to reconsider the entire narrative of the Bronze Age collapse. Rather than external invaders destroying civilization, we see a systems collapse in which climate change, economic disruption, and mass migration combine to end an era. The parallels to our own interconnected world are striking. Like the Bronze Age kingdoms, we depend on complex international trade networks and assume their permanence. The Bronze Age collapse reminds us that such systems are more fragile than they appear. Dr. Asaf Yassur Landau puts it eloquently. The Sea Peoples were both destroyers and creators. They ended one world but helped create another, the world of smaller, more adaptable Iron Age kingdoms that would eventually give rise to classical civilization. The world that emerged from the Bronze Age collapse was fundamentally different from what came before. The great palace economies never recovered. In their place arose smaller, more numerous political entities, the city-states of Phoenicia, the tribal kingdoms of Israel, and Judah, the Greek poleis. These new societies were more resilient because they were less centralized. They developed new technologies. Ironworking spread rapidly, making tools and weapons available to common people for the first time. They created new forms of writing. The Phoenician alphabet, ancestor of our own, replaced the cumbersome cuneiform and hieroglyphic systems. In a very real sense, the Sea Peoples were midwives to the birth of the classical world. The Philistines themselves settled in their pentapolis of Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron, became a major power in the southern Levant. Their conflicts with the emerging Israelite kingdoms, recorded in the Hebrew Bible, would echo through history. Despite all we've learned, mysteries remain. The Weshesh and Danaan peoples mentioned in Egyptian records have left no clear archaeological trace. The exact relationship between different Sea Peoples groups remains unclear. Were they a true confederation, or simply different groups of refugees lumped together by Egyptian scribes? New technologies promise future breakthroughs. Improved DNA extraction techniques may allow us to analyze more ancient remains. Underwater archaeology in the Eastern Mediterranean has already located several Bronze Age shipwrecks that may have belonged to Sea Peoples fleets. Satellite imagery and LiDAR technology continue to reveal previously unknown sites. Dr. Louise Hitchcock of the University of Melbourne is using network analysis to map trade route disruptions during the collapse. We're finding that some routes shut down decades before the destructions, she notes. This suggests the collapse was a longer, more complex process than previously thought. The story of the Sea Peoples is ultimately a human story, of families fleeing disaster, of communities struggling to survive, of the resilience and adaptability that allowed some to build new lives from the ruins of the old. The archaeological evidence reveals not faceless hordes of destroyers, but real people facing extraordinary challenges. The Artifacts Detective has shown us that the Sea Peoples were not the cause of the Bronze Age collapse, but its most visible symptom. They were refugees from a dying world who helped birth a new one. In their story, we see reflections of our own times, mass migrations driven by climate change, the fragility of interconnected systems, and the human capacity for both destruction and renewal. The artifacts don't lie. The evidence speaks for itself. And what it tells us is that the Sea Peoples were not mythical invaders from beyond the known world, but desperate people caught in the collapse of the first global civilization. Their legacy lives on not just in the DNA of modern populations or the ruins of ancient cities, but in the lesson they teach, that even the mightiest civilizations are not immune to the forces of change. As I stand in the ruins of Ugarit, where desperate scribes carved their final messages before the city burned, I'm reminded of why we do this work. Every potsherd, every inscription, every fragment of ancient DNA is a piece of a vast puzzle, the puzzle of who we are and how we came to be. The Sea Peoples remind us that history is not a simple story of progress or decline, but a complex tapestry of human adaptation and survival. They were not the barbarians of outdated textbooks, but people like us, facing challenges not entirely unlike our own. What do you think about this discovery? Does this evidence change your understanding of the Bronze Age collapse? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to see more archaeological investigations like this, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Uncover more ancient mysteries. Follow the Artifacts Detective and join the investigation.